Let's be honest, the systems we have for managing global problems, everything from trade to tech, they're failing. They were built for a world that just doesn't exist anymore. So, what if we could actually hit reboot? In this explainer, we're going to break down a really provocative idea for a new global operating system, one that's designed for the messy, complex world we live in right now. And this quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? We're trying to run 21st century challenges on mid-20th century software. It's slow, it crashes all the time, and all the patches and workarounds just aren't cutting it anymore. It's time to take a hard look at why this code is so fundamentally broken. Okay, so to really get why we even need a reboot, we first have to understand just how much the world's power structure has changed. I mean, the map of who holds power today looks absolutely nothing like it did when our current institutions were born. The key idea we need to wrap our heads around is this: multipolarity. It's a huge shift away from a world dominated by one or maybe two superpowers. Now, we're in a world where influence, whether it's economic, military, or technological, is spread out across several major players. Think of it less like a pyramid and more like a complex, distributed network. And this timeline really puts it all into perspective. We went from that two-player chess match of the Cold War, right? Then, after 1991, we had this brief unipolar moment where the US was the undisputed top dog. But by 2008, with the financial crisis shaking things up and the rise of powers like China and India, that whole system started to fray. And today? Well, today we are living in a genuinely multipolar reality. So here's the crucial point. The world has become multipolar, but our tools for governing it have not. They're stuck in the past. So let's dive in and look at exactly why the institutions we built for a totally different era are just not fit for purpose anymore. Take the G7. It's basically a club of established, wealthy, like-minded allies. But here's the problem. It completely excludes countries like China and India, the two nations that have been the main engines of global economic growth for the last couple of decades. It's like a photograph of a world that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so what about the G20? It's definitely more inclusive, right? Which is a good thing. But its biggest strength is also its biggest weakness. Trying to get 20 different leaders to agree on any decisive action, it's incredibly difficult. So it ends up being big, but also kind of bureaucratic and way too slow when it counts. And then you've got the UN Security Council. I mean, this is probably the most glaring example of all. Its permanent members are the victors of a war that ended nearly 80 years ago. It's an institution that is fundamentally frozen in time, totally unable to represent the powers that are actually shaping our world today. So, if the old software is completely broken, what's the alternative? Well, there's this provocative new idea on the table, one designed for the world as it is today, not as it used to be. It's called the C5. The C5 is basically a proposed governing council made up of 5 nations: the United States, China, India, Russia, and Japan. The whole argument is that these 5 are, bar none, the most consequential players on the global stage right now, the ones with the sheer scale to actually move the needle and make things happen. And what's so interesting here is how this slide breaks down the logic behind it. You see that each member brings a totally critical piece of global power to the table. You've got America's military and financial muscle, China's massive industrial base, India's demographics and growth, Russia's energy and military power, and Japan's role as a technological and financial stabilizer. And when you put them all together, their collective power is just immense. We're talking about a group that accounts for the majority of global GDP, the majority of industrial output, and the bulk of military capability. Plus, they dominate the most important emerging ecosystems, like AI and energy. This is a serious concentration of real-world power. This quote just perfectly sums up the core argument. The reason these 5 countries were chosen isn't about shared values or political systems or who likes whom. It's a cold, hard, pragmatic calculation based on the raw arithmetic of global power. It's about who actually has the capacity to get stuff done. And this right here is the really radical part. The goal isn't to get everyone to agree on morality. It's what the source material calls coordination under difference. You know, for the last 70 years, global governance was at least supposedly about shared values. This new idea says, forget that. Let's just get the powers that can actually move the needle in a room together, even if they're competing like crazy everywhere else. Okay, so this all sounds interesting in theory, but what would a C5 actually do? What's the point? Well, let's look at the mission-critical problems this new group would be designed to solve from day one. The proposal lays out 2 huge, urgent missions.
First, to build a brand new framework for global trade, because let's face it, the World Trade Organization is effectively dead. And second, and this might be even more urgent, to establish global safety rules for artificial intelligence.
And this need for AI governance isn't some abstract, far-off idea. We are talking about very real, potentially existential risks, things like autonomous weapons, deepfakes that could literally cause political systems to collapse, and the very real danger of losing human control over our most critical decisions. These are threats that no single nation can handle on its own.
And this quote really drives home just how high the stakes are. Think about it. Just like the great powers had to come together to manage the threat of nuclear weapons, the argument is that the world's top AI powers have to do the exact same thing for this new algorithmic age. It's a historic challenge, no question.
But even if you have a clear mission, there's a huge and deeply symbolic question that remains. Where would a group this important actually be based? I mean, the choice of a headquarters isn't just about finding office space. It's a powerful statement about what the future of the world looks like. So where do you put the central hub for a new world order? The source material lays out a really fascinating debate on this.
The first matchup is between New York and Shanghai. New York is obviously the capital of the 20th century order. It's home to the UN, but that's also its biggest problem. It represents the past, and it's tied to all that old bureaucracy. Shanghai, on the other hand, is today's global economy. It's fast, it's ruthlessly efficient, and it sits right at the center of the world's new economic gravity.
But that raises a really critical counterargument. Wouldn't putting the headquarters in Shanghai send the completely wrong signal? Would it look less like a council of equals and more like we're just anointing a new leader, swapping one hegemon for another? And that brings us to the final candidate, Mumbai. The whole argument here is about symbolism. A headquarters in Shanghai could be seen as a coronation, right? A formal handing of the baton from the US to China. Mumbai, in contrast, would symbolize shared stewardship, a truly multipolar world that doesn't have a single leader. It faces the Indian Ocean, it's a bridge to the global south, and it represents a world that's trying to move beyond camps. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative question. Is the future of how we run the world best served by a city that represents yesterday's order? A city that represents today's economy, or a city that signals a future of shared responsibility, a world after hegemony? The answer to that is going to say an awful lot about the kind of world we're trying to build.